This is Sonia Wagner representing PCA families in one of our recordings that capture lived experience and best practice evidence-based learning that assists kinship, permanent and adoptive parents and carers in supporting young people. PCA Families has a zero tolerance of child abuse and follows child-safe standards. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay respect to elders past and present and express our intention to move together to a place of justice and partnership. Today, we are speaking with Melanie McGrice about nutrition and how you can help your child in the first 1,000 days of a child's life. Melanie is an advanced accredited practicing dietitian with a master's in dietetics. I struggle with that. So she specialises in early life nutrition, also known as the first 1,000 days from preconception to toddlerhood, when a child's brain, body, and immune system grows the fastest to set the foundations for a child's future. She runs a global business, training other dietitians in this specialty, as well as running a specialist clinic in Melbourne. She's also a permanent care mama. So, welcome, Melanie.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, that's definitely my favourite role.
So, can you tell us about how you came to specialise in early life nutrition?
um, it's quite a long, complicated story. I think it was for many reasons that I was driven to this area. But certainly over the past few years, so I've done fostering for about a decade, and then
Mhm.
just really had on my heart to try taking on a little one, which, as I'm sure most of the audience would know, you've got to commit to a longer period of time. And I was a bit of a
Mm.
workaholic, which you might have got from my bio. And I was
Yes.
like, oh, how am I going to manage that? Um, but then, yeah, it did. And they said to me, oh, would you consider, this little one might go into permanent care. Would you consider that? And I was a bit shell shocked, and then thought
Mm.
about it. I was like, oh, yeah, actually, I could do this. And so I said yes, but then she actually ended up going back to her birth mum. But
Mhm.
then that really planted a seed for me. So after that, I looked for opportunities to take a little one through permanent care.
Mhm.
And yeah, so now I have my gorgeous daughter who I love to pieces. But with, I guess, all of that, both the fostering and um, the little ones that I took in
Mhm.
that didn't quite make it to
Mm.
permanent care, and then finally getting my permanent care daughter.
Mhm.
Obviously, you get so much experience that you don't get from anywhere else, and
Yes.
I think that, in conjunction with my nutrition background and research, I
Mhm.
just learned that there's so much opportunity in terms of
Mhm.
these first 1,000 days for these little ones. And
Mm.
I actually feel a bit frustrated
Mhm.
now, that I've learned so much information, and I
Mhm.
wish that I had have known that earlier. And I just
Yeah.
think that there's some kids that, obviously we want to give every birth family an opportunity, but there's some that are highly likely to end up in permanent care,
Mm.
and that have been born, addicted to drugs, and have
Mhm.
parents have had alcohol throughout the pregnancy and so forth. Um, and now, having learnt the research, there's so much that I think we
Mm.
need to be doing in that first 1,000 days,
Mhm.
while their little ones' brains are still developing, and
Mm.
that can then help to minimize so many problems down the track. So I just,
Yeah.
I would like to see the systems and the processes change, that these little ones get more attention, rather than diagnoses and things happening years and years down the track.
Yeah. I guess you're
Yeah.
saying what you can be doing something now, so let's get it
Oh,
done. And like so many of us, we research so much to try and help as much as we can, right? But you've got a special knowledge that's sitting behind what you're researching. So it's really important to share that. And I know when we talked, you said you were reviewing sort of the evidence between nutrition and connecting that with FASD, Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder. So I'd love to know more about that if you're happy to share some of that with us.
definitely. And there's a lot. I guess first of all, probably the first place to start is just helping people understand a little bit about why nutrition is so important for
Mhm.
mums who drink during the pregnancy.
Mhm.
So I've got a few notes. Hopefully, people
Yeah,
don't
great.
mind me looking at those. So first of all, yeah. So it's important to know that alcohol has a really big impact on both a mum's, like a birth mum's nutrition, and therefore the growing fetus's nutrition. So in two key ways. So first of all, alcohol in and itself is really high in kilojoules.
Okay.
So to put it into context, so sugar or carbohydrates, they provide around 16 kilojoules per gram. Alcohol provides about 29 kilojoules per gram, so almost double. So it's really high in calories. So often, for that reason, for the fact that it's high in calories, and often depending on how much somebody's drinking, it decreases, it impacts people's appetite, it impacts their ability to be able to organize their meals and so forth. So often the drinking in and of itself can cause malnutrition for the mum. And then obviously the birth mum is providing that nutrition through to the growing fetus. And so if mum is malnourished, that means baby is malnourished. And then secondly, mums can also end up with secondary malnutrition. So what happens there is that with alcohol in particular, it causes malabsorption, which means that mum isn't actually absorbing those nutrients properly. And so therefore, again, bub isn't absorbing those nutrients properly. And so for people who don't know this term of the first 1,000 days, it's, as you said, it's from preconception through to toddlerhood. And it's a really important period of time. We say that this first 1,000 days, like, it's when a baby's brain grows faster than it ever will in its in our whole entire life. It's when all of the genetic programming happens for our immune system and our learning abilities and all of those types of things. So I guess the key messages are, first of all, if mums are drinking, or maybe they're not even drinking, maybe they're doing drugs, but they're not eating properly during their pregnancy, then that's having a massive impact on the development of baby's brain and immune system and everything else. But it doesn't end there, I think is the key thing, that there's so much brain development that happens over those first few years of life. And so there's so much opportunity in those first few years for healing to be done, or at least risk to be reduced a little bit, harm to be reduced a bit. And actually there's a really great quote that I read in a research paper. It said, although abstinence from alcohol is the only way to prevent FASD, it is possible to reduce its harmful effects through dietary therapy. And I was like, wow, why aren't people doing more?
Yeah, absolutely. So can you talk us through some of those findings? I know you mentioned a few different minerals and supplements, and
So I guess there's kind of 5 kind of messages that I would talk through. So the first one is that the research papers have found that there are particular nutrients that are often impacted by alcohol intake during pregnancy. And so those are things like particularly B vitamins and vitamin A, magnesium and iron. That's the first point. Second point is that there's other research studies that show that that have found particular nutrients that have been found to be low in offspring of people who have been drinking during pregnancy. So those in particular, thus far, where the research currently is, and there's not a huge amount of research, but where it currently is, it looks like there's studies on zinc, magnesium and choline. So I'll give you kind of all the research first, and then I'll get to some practical messages. The third point is, the third sort of avenue of research is into nutrients that have been identified that can potentially slow the development of FASD or reduce its severity. And so I think this is probably what most people want to know. And so there's, again, 4 different categories. So one is vitamin D, which acts sort of on the brain hormones. The second one is nutrients that are important for neuron development in the brain. So that's the ones that have been found there are vitamin A, omega-3, folate, zinc, and choline.
Okay.
The third section are antioxidants, so in particular vitamin E, folate, and selenium. And then the fourth one is that there's really interesting research around iron and mums not having adequate iron during pregnancy and that being an issue. So yeah, there's so much research. I hope it doesn't overwhelm people. But and then the fourth area is that there's also research that has looked at kids who had FASD and their dietary intakes compared to the general population. And again, those general studies found that the kids with FASD tended to have lower intakes of fats, vitamin D, and calcium. And then there were also a whole lot of other nutrients that were low, but were also low in the general population. So, yeah,
so there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, then there's some dietary things as well, which I'll go through in a minute, but they're sort of the nutrients. So I guess my key messages, to put it in more understandable terms, is that first of all, I think that if you've got a child with FASD, or even if you don't, like if mum has been drinking alcohol during pregnancy or doing drugs during pregnancy, my personal belief is that these, whatever age you're getting them, so bubs, infants, toddlers, when they're having a blood test, to get a blood screen of some of those nutrient markers, just done through the GP. So things like I would like to be seeing iron levels checked, folate checked, B12 checked, even B1 checked. So your doctor, like anybody's doctor, should have a good idea of kind of key nutrients to be checking in a blood test. Vitamin D I'd add as well. The second thing would be that I think it's a really good idea, again, for anybody in that category, if mum has been drinking during pregnancy or doing drugs, that people should be having at least one nutrition assessment through a dietitian with some expertise in either pregnancy or paediatrics. And hopefully people can get that funded either through Medicare or NDIS early intervention, maybe through permanent care,
maybe PCA families.
But yeah, so but I really think that would be a great idea. And then probably my third thing is probably the best research at the moment is around choline. Choline is really important for babies' brain development, and in fact, current research shows that most mums don't have adequate choline during pregnancy, but particularly for these babies, and particularly the ones that are at risk of FASD. So the research isn't yet strong enough to be able to, for authorities to be saying everybody should be on choline. But and so it's not professional for me to be saying that, but I would be saying definitely get advice about that, because and ask for specific advice about that, because I think that's a really important question to be asking. The other one would also be omega-3. So choline and omega-3 would be the two big ones that I would be asking about whether they should be supplemented.
All right. So and when you talk about supplement, are you talking about trying to change what you eat, or are you talking about supplements, or a bit of both? So
as a dietitian, I tend to be very much food first, but when I'm talking about omega-3 and choline, I think supplements. I believe that although you can get both of those nutrients from food, I believe, having looked at the research, that the amount that these little ones would benefit from is higher than what you can get from food. Because they've got a lot to make up for. And some nutrients you don't want to have too much of, because they can then have additional effects. So for example, if you take too much iron, you're going to end up with constipation. But with choline and omega-3. Not that you want to, like, you don't want to be taking tablespoons of it, but yeah, taking a good quality supplement of those two nutrients is generally going to be beneficial for most of these kids.
Okay. And putting them in a smoothie or something like that. There are particular ways that you should absorb them. So
choline, I bought it as a powder, which is quite hard to find, to be honest.
Okay.
Because usually it comes in a capsule, which you're not going to give to a little one.
Yeah.
So I bought it as a powder. And then mix it into my daughter's milk. And then omega-3 usually is like an oily type of thing. So you can again get liquid versions of it.
Okay.
And so you can mix it into something, or just give it as is on a teaspoon, like a medicine, or in a little syringe. Is another option, depending on how.
When I've had those little plastic things before, I've pulled them apart and put them on a teaspoon and mix them into things. I like the idea of plastic, or whatever it is. Maybe it's not plastic.
Good idea. And like, I would just say also, like, be aware when you're buying the supplements, because you do want to get the right ones. Like, I know I've seen there's gummies on the market, and like omega-3 gummies and things that have got just such a tiny amount that it's more lolly than it is supplement. So it is worthwhile, I believe, to go and get some proper advice. Like, I can't give brands and things over.
No, I understand.
I think it's a good idea to speak to somebody who can give you some proper advice, make sure that your little one's getting the right amount. And also, doses are going to change for kids depending upon their age and so forth as well.
Okay. Where's the best spot to look for a dietitian, out of interest, or nutritionist?
That's a good question. Really, anywhere. So you could ask your GP for referral. You can go to Dietitians Association. You can do a find a dietitian in there. That's probably the best place. You can get onto Google or Instagram. But yeah, although you could see any dietitian, I'd probably be recommending, if you can, somebody who, like I said, either specialises in pregnancy or paediatrics is probably ideal. Yeah.
Great. I think another issue that's often fairly common in our kind of world is helping children understand when they are hungry, full, or satisfied. So do you have any tips, or can you tell us more about that at all, and keeping them safe and also being attuned to that? So
So again, this was something that I really noticed with my daughter. And so I just had these massive explosions of aha moments when I had a look at the research. So the research that is available, there's, again, a few key messages. So one is that these children tend to have impaired satiety. So it means, like, they're hungry all the time. They tend to snack more than other kids. They tend to be really hungry. And again, like, the research hasn't got to the point where they can explain why, but I would also put two and two together to show that the research shows that these kids are much more physically active than kids in the general population. And again, that's very true for my daughter.
Interesting, yes.
So it makes sense that that's part of it. And in fact, there's one study that found that kids with FASD eat the equivalent of an additional meal compared to other kids per day. So it's quite a significant amount of additional calories. There's also research to show that kids with FASD generally tend to have, there's a higher risk of them being underweight. And whether that's due to picky eating or hyperactivity or or the fact that they need these additional kilojoules, we don't know yet. But I think, again, it's about knowing your child and knowing what their growth charts are looking like, and knowing that they might be a bit more hungry than usual. And so I think, one of the things that I've really noticed, is that if they go off to daycare or what have you, and as soon as they leave the table, other people presume that they've had enough to eat. Because, you know, with kids with FASD, it's hard to keep them sitting at the table when really they haven't had enough to eat. It's just that they can't sit still for long enough.
Yes.
So I think it's really important to be ensuring that they are getting adequate food. And so it might be just about having more eating occasions, if they're going to be shorter eating occasions. Yeah, so.
Okay. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got higher risks of disordered eating. Constipation is more common, which again could be due to the fact that they're not having as much to eat, so not getting as much fibre could be part of it. Could be because they're more dehydrated because they're doing so much physical activity, and again not taking the time to drink. So both lack of fibre and lack of fluid can cause that constipation. So again,
and then it makes you not want to eat too, doesn't it, when you're
getting
constipated
that's right.
all the time?
That vicious cycle. Yeah. So I think again, this is where people need to get that personalised advice to think, okay, well, what's going on for my child? But yeah, I just think it's interesting to know that these are some of the common risks when it comes to nutrition and diet for kids with fetal alcohol syndrome disorder, and that it's not necessarily abnormal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just to keep an eye out for them.
Yeah. So you mentioned there, you know, extreme pickiness and I guess sensory issues come up a lot too. So do you have any tips around those things?
Again, it's hard to say because obviously, yeah, for every child it's going to be different. So I would again say get that personalised advice. But so I guess a couple of things jump out. So first of all, sometimes it's not about getting kids to eat the food, but just becoming familiar with it. So I have always been big with, again, both with kids I've fostered and with my daughter, on getting them to start by just playing with food and getting used to it. So I love the baby-led weaning concept, but where you're really getting them to choose and play with foods as opposed to just trying to feed them. So so we play food games all the time, like cooking and so even if we cook something and she doesn't eat it, then so be it. Like, it's still her getting familiar with foods, picking foods from the garden, you're growing your own things. And if you don't have your own garden, maybe visiting friends and family who can,
or community gardens.
Right, community gardens, like anything, going to the supermarket or the market, doing taste testing, like any of those. And even if it's, again, not eating, like just sometimes playing games, like, you know, with little ones you can do all the little pasta games where you get them to thread them or maybe and like, again, for the really little ones, just a sensory play. Like, food is great for sensory play. So it might be messy, obviously, but, you know, it might be a container of mashed pumpkin and a container of mince and, like, cooked mince.
There's places you can go to for that too. So if you don't like doing it at home,
so but trying to keep like using food as a sensory play tool, I think is a great thing to do. And then a second tip would be is just to try to when kids are picky, you don't want to all of a sudden go eat your broccoli. Like, you have to often go very, very slowly. So it might be that they'll only eat chicken nuggets from McDonald's and pasta with nothing on it. So that might be, and, you know, the pasta has to be like a penne pasta or something along those lines. Like, your child might be that picky. And if that's the case, it's about really slow changes. So it might be about, you know, rather than trying to put something on top of the pasta, it might be just about, oh, okay, well, how about trying one pasta of a different shape, just and doing it in a really fun time. It might be about trialing those chicken McNuggets, maybe not even from so maybe they always get them from McDonald's, maybe instead of trying to get them from somewhere else, maybe it's about, like, that they always have them in the packet. So maybe it's about just taking them out of the packet. Like, that tinier change can sometimes be how slow you need to progress
Yes.
to expand their horizons. So it really just
Yes.
depends on how extreme the child is. But,
Yeah, great. They're great
yeah.
suggestions. So, and what about older children? I guess we are talking a lot about younger children. Is it too late once you get to 6 or 7 or 8 or?
No, definitely not too late. You don't want to completely give up by any means. There's certainly things that you can do, but I guess part of the reason why I'm so passionate is that anything that you do in those first few years is going to have a multiplied effect compared to what you're doing later on.
Yes.
So I would really like to see things change so that it just, as I said, becomes routine. That baby's been born and they know, that mum was drinking during pregnancy. Okay, well, straight away, straight from hospital, they're obviously put onto a formula. So put them onto some choline supplements at the same time, and let's get these things started right from the word go.
Early.
But yeah, so for older kids, so I would still do all of the things that I've discussed. So I'd still be getting a blood test to look out for any nutritional deficiencies. I'd still be recommending that personalised assessment. I'd still be, I'd be still tracking their growth. One thing I didn't mention before about growth is post-puberty, girls in particular can sort of go to the other extreme and put on too much weight, is what the research says. So, but tracking their calorie intake, trying to have that variety of nutritious foods. So, yeah, it's still definitely not too late, but not as great as getting it right early.
Yeah. I'm curious too, obviously you've with the children that you've had in your life, you would have been creating a very safe space for them at mealtime. So I'm just curious, what are some of the things that you might have done over that period of time? It's always good to share those things.
Well, I think probably one of the first things, it's been more of a frustration for me than anything, but is what I was mentioning before about trying to get my daughter to stay at the table at meal times. So accepting the fact that that's not going to happen, and I still continuously work on it. But like if she gets up, it's more about then getting her back again. I've got a sensory cushion for her to sit on. And so as opposed to just going, okay, that's the end of the meal. So I think that's important. I do things at the table to try and help her stay at the table to eat. So I'll read to her, read her books to keep her entertained. I found one thing, I don't know, probably again not very dietetically correct, but I found it's worked really well, both with my daughter and with other kids too. So I tell them not to eat healthy foods. So we have this joke. I'm like, you're not allowed to eat that salmon. That'll make you too smart. And you're getting too smart already. And if you get too smart, she's always trying to sneak it.
Well, again, it's knowing your child, isn't it? So
that's right.
whatever
like,
works.
No more carrots for you. Okay, if you eat carrots, you'll be able to see too well. You'll be able to spot everything before I can spot it. She's I'm eating carrots, Mummy.
Yeah. I've heard from other families things like they have like a sticker so they can stand at the sticker at a bench, and it's like it is about getting creative and finding ways that work. So I wouldn't rule anything out.
Exactly, that's right. But I think it's about just trying to make things fun and like you said, knowing your child. But I think it can, like anything, it can become stressful, particularly when you know how much good these foods are doing for your child, and so you really want them to eat it, but they just pick up on your angst so easily. And so I think the more fun that we can make things,
the better.
Always helps.
Great. And so do you have any recommendations for resources that parents can look at as well?
Unfortunately, not really. Like there's not really great resources out there on nutrition and FASD yet. I would love to make some in the future. So yeah, people are welcome, depending on when they're watching this, to just check out. So I've got a YouTube channel and a website. So my YouTube channel is Nourish with Melanie, and it's certainly got videos about different aspects of nutrition for little ones generally, but they're not specifically around FASD. Okay. So like I've got one on iron-rich foods for kids and things like that.
Okay, right.
So yeah, so that might be helpful for people. And then yeah, like I'm fairly easy to track down. So yeah, feel free to track down and see if I've put together some resources for people by then.
Yeah. Fantastic. And is there anything else you wanted to comment on today that's important to share?
Yeah, not really, just that you guys are doing an amazing job. All of the other permanent care and adoptive parents that I've met are incredible, and yeah, and so I think it's not about having a perfect diet, it's just every little thing that we can do. Yeah, like adds progress value. Is perfection. Yeah, adds value. Exactly.
Absolutely. So I think that's a really important message, isn't it? We can just keep adding to them. So yeah, do as much as we can. So yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. So I feel the diet's really important and can do amazing things for anybody. So and it's good for me. I'll be watching what I eat today. Thanks so much, Melanie.
Thanks so much for having me.